All right, episode 5. So, we got a lot to talk about since the last time that I was on here. My name is Gage Ryan. If you guys have not heard me before, you guys can follow me on the various social media links you see below. This is Contender, an MMA-centered podcast. So, TJ Dillashaw. I don't know anybody that was actually surprised per se. Like that just seemed to kind of be a given. It's sort of like whenever you hear that Vitor Belfort test positive, you're just like, well, yeah, it's Vitor. And I don't know if that's a good thing that some fighters you just kind of expect to be on something. There's certain fighters that you don't expect to be on something. You know, your Michael Bispings, your BJ Penns, your George St. Pierre's, your whoever. You know, there's those fighters that you're pretty confident that they're on something. Your TJ Dillashaw's, your Vitor Belfort's, your John Jones's, your like just all those kind of people of the world. And there's people that you just don't expect to be on anything. So when it came to TJ Dillashaw testing positive, like I really don't know what anybody expected. Like it's very clear if you see, like, let's say his body in the lead up to the Barao fight versus, well, the first Barao fight, and then you look at his body now, they're completely different. And it's a matter of years we're talking about, and now all of a sudden he's shredded and he looks like a killer. And it's like, come on, man. Like, we all know what's going on here. And the fact that he gave up his belt, like, is what he found out about it, yeah, I mean, there's no mistake in this here. It's one of those things where even if he doesn't admit it, which I'm sure he never will, because it seems like a lot of fighters just are kind of into that mindset of like, I need to just take this to my grave. And I don't know, man. I feel like it's just better to be honest. I mean, like the fact that there's so many people that just swear up and down that they've never taken anything in their lives, and you just look at them and go, dude, come on, man. If you look at John Jones, that's been his thing for quite some time, is that he will just deny in the face of any kind of evidence. And, you know, more power to him, I guess. I mean, it's pretty crummy if you ask me. But just when you have those kind of fighters, like a lot of times there's really nothing's going to change. They're going to find different ways around the rules. Or they could be like John Jones and they can just get, you know, super duper lucky and get protected by Dana all day. And, you know, oh, we're gonna see different picograms of different steroids appearing in his system just because that's the way the testing is. And you know, John Jones isn't taking any steroids; they're just pulsating in and out of his system. And you know, that, you know, there's no way that we're on steroids here. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing going on here. All we have is just some innocent picograms, man. And you just go, okay, buddy, if that's the way that this is going to go, that's the way this is going to go, man. I don't know. I think it'd just be better if you just told the truth. But what do I know? So, it's interesting to see. Like, what is the bantamweight division going to do from here? You know, and of course, Uriah Faber and Cody Garbrandt just came out of the woodwork immediately. We're pointing the finger at Dillashaw, talking about, yeah, he's always been on steroids, and he helped our teammates figure out how to avoid being on steroids, or how to avoid testing positive, and it's just like, dude, come on. But, yeah, I can't say that anybody's surprised, and it's pretty clear that TJ's been on something for quite some time. And I mean, that he still got just dealt with. In his last fight against Henry Cejudo, he just got dealt with. And it was so funny because of how much shit TJ talked. And I mean, there was a lot of shit talking on both sides, don't get me wrong. But I mean, TJ saying that, like, yeah, they're hiring me as the assassin for the flyweight division, and you know, Henry Cejudo, I'm just going to show him that he's not all that, and I'm the greatest band. And then, of course, he gets smashed in like 30 seconds. And then, of course, he tests positive even after that. So this has just been a super duper bad couple months for TJ Dillashaw. And I don't know where he goes from here out of this. I mean, he's going to take his year suspension, of course. And who does he fight when he comes back? Do we see him fight Dominic Cruz? Do we see him fight one of the top contenders like Moraes? Do we see the Henry Cejudo rematch? And Cejudo says he's never going to fight him again. I think that if they give him the right paycheck, he will. And I mean, it's sort of like the whole Daniel Cormier, John Jones thing. They're likely going to fight a third time. I think it's more likely than not. And I guess to transition to that, it's like, I don't know how I feel about that third fight anymore. I think that if they were to fight tomorrow, Jones would win. Jones is very clearly on steroids. And if you don't think he's on steroids, you're fucking just silly. Like, I just don't know what to say to you at this point. What is this, failed test number 8, I think? And I mean, it's the fact that it's always something with Jones. It's always something. So, I don't know what to think. Like, I think that it's very likely that Jones will beat DC a third time. If we see the current John Jones we're seeing, who's, roided out of his mind. I think that if we see a clean Jones versus DC, I think that DC beats him all day. But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. And we have plenty of people that want to talk about how Jones is the greatest, even though he keeps failing drug tests. Hey, those whole rules that we're supposed to follow, yeah, Jones follows pretty much none of them. Well, he's still the greatest. I don't know, man. So, yeah, the whole DC, where do we go from here with DC? DC is, like, I would be totally content if he just retired now, and I would still call him arguably the best ever. You have DC, he's done everything. He has nothing left to prove, and I think that if they fight, or if Jones and DC fight again, which I think I'd put like a 65-35 chance on 65% it happens, 35% it doesn't, and I don't know. I think if I'm booking, I'm putting DC in there against someone like maybe Ngannou. If Ngannou wins his fight against JDS, which I think he will. I just don't like JDS has been knocked out, a couple times. And at the same token, just like you can see that even with Francis, when he almost misses punches, when he just nicks somebody, that is other people's just the best overhand right they can throw. It's just crazy how hard Ngannou hits, man. Like, you saw that he landed on Cain Velasquez one time. It was a short little shovel hook uppercut, like whenever people shoot in for the takedown, he always comes in with that uppercut. And, man, you just see Cain just buckle. Like, he goes limp, the knees go out, and then he falls real bad on his knee and tears his knee apart. And that's unfortunate for someone like Cain. But, I mean, Francis was going to win that fight anyway. So that's another thing I wonder about is, like, where Cain Velasquez, like, who's he going to come back and face? I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. I think I'd like to see Cain Velasquez versus Curtis Blades. I think that'd be a hell of a fight. I think Cain would probably rip Curtis Blades apart, if we're being honest. But we'll say that outside of that, I would like to see him. Honestly, JDS has been calling for a fourth fight between him and Cain. And, man, honestly, I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't at least somewhat interested in that. And I know it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, what are you talking about? It's a fourth fight, blah, blah, blah. Cain won twice already. Yeah, I get that, and I agree with you. I agree with you completely. But just, I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't, if I wasn't a little bit intrigued at a fourth fight. And, man, I like the idea that a lot of these fighters are starting to fight more often, or you're starting to see them line up their next 2 or 3 fights. And honestly, I think that with all of I think we could see a couple trilogies that the first person won, or that one person won the first 2. I think we could see, like, let's say if they went into a rubber match, it's 1-1, they win, it's 2-1 now. I could see a couple different fights being made that would be a fourth fight. I don't know if I want to see them, but I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't mind seeing JDS fight Cain Velasquez a fourth time. And I wonder, with USADA in and all that, I wonder if JDS could even survive. And I'm willing to bet that he doesn't. I'm willing to bet that Cain gets him out of there. And I like JDS, but at the end of the day, Cain Velasquez is Cain Velasquez. So unless something just horrible happens to Cain, I think it's business as usual there. But that's another thing about this whole situation going on with Nunes and Holm is a big one that I want to talk about. With Nunes and Amanda Nunes versus Holly Holm, this is a fight to potentially determine the greatest female fighter of all time. You saw that Holly Holm had her issues throughout the middle of her run, and then she lost to Cyborg, and she's been on this kind of hot and cold switch going on. For my money, she should be known as the first female 2-division champion because she got completely screwed over in that decision against Germaine de Randamie. And Germaine de Randamie, not for naught, is the probably the worst champion in UFC history. I mean, like, you can make cases for Tim Sylvia and guys and these other guys. And, maybe you can make a claim for this person or that person in the female division, although we've seen some pretty good female champions. We haven't really seen any just flop champions. Like, there were one or two, but not many. But, so you have arguably the worst champion of all time. Okay, she wins in one of the most controversial decisions of all. I don't even think it's a controversial decision because I think pretty much everybody agrees that she shouldn't have won that fight. I've never seen a single person that says, no, Jermaine Durandamy deserved that decision over Holly Holm. I don't know anyone that says that. So, yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree that Holly Holm should be noted as the first ever two-division women's UFC champion. Now, Amanda Nunes is the first person to do it simultaneously, which is excellent. And then now, just imagine what happens if Holly Holm finds a way to beat Amanda Nunes. And get this, I am going to predict that Holly Holm wins the belt. I think she wins this fight. You have Amanda Nunes, who's a pit bull, man. She goes out there, she keeps the pressure on you, blah, blah, blah. And she just will, she'll put her foot on the gas, empty out the tank in the first round. And honestly, I think Holly Holm is going to stay around. I think that Holly just possesses better boxing. I think don't get me wrong, I think Amanda Nunes is extremely talented. And I think if she beats Holly Holm in this fight, I think she is the greatest female fighter of all time. I mean, she already is, but in my mind, this is to determine between the top two. And no, I don't give that to Chris Cyborg because of how many times she's tested positive for steroids. If you think that Holly Holm, Jesus Christ. If you don't think, and it's anybody out there, if you do not think that Chris Cyborg has ever taken a steroid, it's sort of like the same people that think that Yoel Romero never took a steroid. It's just funny to me. And, I understand that it's totally possible that they might have just been clean from the start, but I highly doubt it. I mean, especially if you look at Yoel Romero. Jesus Christ. That dude is a freak of nature. He's a different kind of freak of nature. There's freak of natures like Francis Ngannou, who, grew up who worked in a sand mine and got fucking ripped in Cameroon. And he just happens to be a pretty good boxer and knocks people's heads clear off their shoulders. We're still looking for Alistair Overeem's head out in orbit, says Daniel Cormier. But and then there's other freaks of nature that just scream performance-enhancing drug. And to me, you got Vitor Belfort was one of those guys. Yoel Romero is one of those guys. John Jones is one of those guys. You just look at their body and go, that isn't natural. That doesn't, John Jones, who came into his second fight against DC with, a clear defined six-pack and, what looks like an eight-pack forming. That's not natural. That is good for some unintentional humor. A couple of unintentional humors that I love in this game is I love... unintentional comedies for me are the people that are clearly on steroids and the people that do the fake martial arts. You know what I mean? There's people that think that you can just smack someone on the side of the neck, with your fingers pointed a certain way, and they'll just fall to the ground and start seizing on the ground. It's so funny because you can just tell how bullshit they are. Those are some of my favorite videos online. They really are. There's those guys. I love... Excuse me. I love those people that come out with the bullshit martial arts that clearly you have no clue what's going on and it's very clearly set up, and there's people that believe it. It's so funny. I mean, or those karate demonstrations that I was actually in one of these that are actually at least somewhat legitimate because they break boards that aren't pre-broken and whatnot, but I mean they're pretty thin. You know what I mean? If you take those boards, you could probably you could take one of the let's say a middle of the road size strength person of the room, find someone middle of the road that is kind of strong but not super strong. They could probably break it with their hands is what I'm saying. But it's I don't know, man. you have just all this craziness going around right now in the UFC. I mean, you got all the stuff going on with Tony Ferguson. That's a big one I wanted to touch on. Is Tony Ferguson? I think that it was kind of fucked up for TMZ to post the phone call of Tony Ferguson's wife calling 911. I mean, I understand it's TMZ. What do you expect? But that wasn't right, in my opinion. But at the same token, it's the age of technology, and you kind of can't help it. And the phone call makes it seem pretty bad. But Tony Ferguson's wife has also repeatedly mentioned that he's never been physically abusive in any way, shape, or form. Never to the kids, never to her, never to himself, never. And it's just a case that he was starting to go crazy. They're like, what I think she said in the call that he was trying to put holy water on her, or some shit like that. Like, it's very clear that Tony's got some issues with something. I don't know if it's drugs. I don't know if it's mental illness. I don't know if it's both. I don't know if it's neither. It's a tough position that he's in, and he's in a very tough place right now, and he's in a very bad place right now, because especially being such a known figure in the community, man, all of his news goes to the top, like goes to the front page. So he has just you can't really get much more popular as a fighter than Tony Ferguson without being like Conor McGregor. You know what I mean? Like there's stars and superstars. Tony's a star. You know what I mean? And like really, there's only been like 3 superstars in the whole history of the UFC, or like 4. You know, so it's. I wonder what's going on with Tony, and I don't know if it's drugs. I don't know if reports have come out. I just know the basics. I know, you know, that she filed a restraining order against him, and that he can't see his kid right now, I believe, and just he's all sorts of fucked up right now. But I think he'll be okay. I really do. I understand that it's not the best time right now, but I do think he'll be okay at some point. I think that when you have these less than desirable moments, I think it really shows, you know, how far they're willing to come back and have the life they used to have. You know what I mean? There's some people that just never recover from situations like this, and there are people that do, and they're better than ever. And Tony Ferguson, what I worry about him is that he's going to change who he is too drastically. Like, here's what I mean, is that the one thing that works about the reason why Tony Ferguson's entire fight strategy works is because it's his. There is nobody on earth that fights like Tony Ferguson. What he does is he puts the pressure on you. He's got a fucking gas tank, like a 757, or whatever the hell it is. He's got a gas tank like you wouldn't believe. So he comes out, he puts the pressure on you. He's throwing all these wild techniques, these spinning techniques. He goes jump front kicks to the body, they're push kicks kind of. And, you know, he's willing to do a lot of unorthodox stuff, the spinning back fist and spinning elbows and all that fun stuff. But then also, if you go to the ground with him, he is a killer, man. He is a killer. He's got some of the best jiu-jitsu in the UFC. He's got rubber guard. He's got the twister. He's got of course, he's got his bread and butter, his Doris choke, his guillotine, and triangle chokes and whatnot. But, I mean, he is just an exceptional fighter. But he is just this big whirlwind that you somehow just gotta find a way to manage. And nobody's done it in, 7 years at this point? 8 years at this point? And it's tough to see anybody doing it except Khabib, in my opinion. And I think that Tony Ferguson, for as dangerous off his back as he is, which we all know he is, for as dangerous as he is off of his back, I think Khabib is just a little better from the top position. And I don't think Tony is. He's not, he's a top-tier jiu-jitsu fighter, but he's not quite Brian Ortega. You know, he's more Anderson Silva than he is Brian Ortega, in that, yeah, he could catch you with a submission, but if you're going with a real top-tier, top-of-the-line guy, it's pretty difficult for him to find a submission. So, you go with Tony Ferguson, man. The reason why his strategy works is just because it's his. My whole point in saying all this is because there are those people, there are those athletes that whenever they go sober, when they find God, whenever it is, they come back and they're never the same athletes. And I think what works about Tony Ferguson is just how much of a wild man he is in his real life. This is who he is. That style that you see in there is just 100% him. And it's with a lot of tactic, and it's with a lot of thought, and there's a lot of skill going on in what he does. He is one of the best lightweights of all time, for sure. That's not even up for discussion at this point. But the reason why it works is because he puts the pressure out, he gets his opponents tired, he's able to throw all these unorthodox techniques that he will catch you with every now and again, and he does have power. But above all, then whenever it gets to the ground, he is going to strangle you. And when it comes to that, when it comes to putting the pace on that person, and when it comes to just throwing these wild creative techniques, you see a lot of that in Jon Jones as well, where you have these fighters that are so unorthodox and creative and fluid, but then they tweak a couple things, and then they just don't ever seem to be the same. And I'll give you a real good example of that in Anthony Pettis. Now, Anthony Pettis has come back, and he's figured it out. He remembers what got him to the dance. You got to dance with the one that brought you. And what he's known as is a very good and creative striker that also puts the pressure on someone. You know, he's known for the Showtime kick and all that, but if you try to take him down, he's going to submit you. But then what Anthony tried to do is he changed his style up to be more takedown heavy, and he was throwing more basic strikes and not really putting the pressure on as much. He started to get beat up quite a bit. So when he came back and he figured out, oh wait, I remember who I am now. You see him knock out Wonder Boy. Crazy. And I want to see where Pettis goes. And I think he's going to fight the winner of Gage and Barboza. And I think that that's going to be a dope fight. But it's a question of who wins between Barboza and Gaethje. And honestly, I think it's going to be Gaethje. And I'm not positive on it, but I think Gaethje's going to beat him. I think Gaethje, what he does is he brings in the pressure, he brings in the speed, he's always willing to brawl. But how do you take away kicks? You take away kicks primarily with pressure. You saw that in the Tony Ferguson-Anthony Pettis fight. You see that in the Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov fight. You see that in not exactly in that fight, but that was more like, I'm going to pressure you so you can't kick me, but also so you can't take me, so like I force the shot out of you. That was more of a better way of saying it, but what was it? You take away kicks with pressure. So, I mean, like that helped out a lot in Daniel Cormier's second fight against Jon Jones up until the ending, of course. But when you're able to take away those kicks and take away that pressure, take away like that kind of technique, or be able to, like, if you keep it in a phone booth, Edson Barboza struggles. You saw him struggle with that against Pettis. You saw him struggle with that against Khabib Nurmagomedov. You see him struggle with people that don't give him the space to be creative. It's kind of like Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping. And here's the thing. In that fight, you really saw what Michael Bisping could do. That was the biggest victory of his career by far. That made him. That was the elusive victory that he desperately needed in his career, and he got it. And with Michael Bisping in that fight, is he pressured Anderson. A lot of times, Anderson would push the pace sometimes, but a lot of it was him pushing him back and trying to have him just dancing to the outside and trying to find his range and set his stuff up that way. But then you also saw Bisping land his own shots. But he took away those kicks with pressure, and that's a big way to avoid a kicking-based offense. And that's why a kicking-based offense tends to not be as effective as like just a more well-rounded striker, or just as someone with hands, because hands are much better in the phone booth than kicks are. Now, with that said, though, Edson Barboza is not just a kicker, and that's what a lot of people get wrong about him, is that he isn't just a kicker, he is a striker. He's a striker, too. He has very good hands as well. I mean, he works with Mark Henry, who's arguably the best coach in the game. He works with his hands, with some of the best coaches and some of the best teammates in the world. And if you've seen in his last couple of fights, he lands some significant shots with his hands. It's just his feet are his bread and butter. And so when you take away, it's like taking away Daniel Cormier's wrestling, taking away the kicks of Barboza. And so I think that if he fights the way he tried to against Khabib Nurmagomedov, where he was just kind of like backing up at all times and leg kicking and staying on the outside, I don't know. I think Gaethje's eventually going to be able to cut him off. Gaethje has great wrestling too. A lot of people forget that. But I really don't know what's going to happen with this fight. But I'm pretty excited to see what goes down. So I think that you see a fight where Gaethje wins. I think it's more likely that Gaethje wins this fight, but man, it's going to be interesting. And now we got Anderson Silva versus Jared Cannonier. I think that this is a little bit too early for Jared. I saw Cannonier's last fight. It was an awesome fucking fight. Great performance by Cannonier. That said, though, it's quite possible that Anderson's going to smash his face in. Because Anderson is now gotten to that point where he's late in his career, but he's finally taking, like, he's back to what brought him to the dance, which is that he's doing that creative, elusive striking with his weird movements and his awkward hand speed and awkward hand movements and his hand speed and blah blah blah. And you saw some real good moments out of him in the Michael Bisping fight, and that was a couple years ago. Then you saw him in his fight against Israel Adesanya, and it was like he was getting there. He was getting back to where he used to be, which is just that creative, dynamic striker. Whereas before he was starting to freeze up, and like you saw after the 2 Chris Weidman fights, he just hasn't been the same. But you're starting to see the fighter that he was now more than you have. And Jared Cannonier very likely could, not very likely, but he could quite possibly get smashed in this fight. Now, then again, Cannonier, watch him go out there and just smash Anderson in this fight and just make me look make me look stupid. But I think Anderson actually has a pretty good chance of winning that fight. So book that. How about that? But when Silva fought Bisping, for instance, that was pretty close to the real Anderson Silva that we saw for so many years, because he did everything that he normally would in a fight. He looked exactly like old Anderson. The thing is, Michael Bisping still beat him, and I think that's crazy. And I think that's a huge victory for Michael Bisping. When we look back on his career and you see he beat an Anderson Silva that looked pretty damn good. Anderson landed his shots, of course. Bisping landed his shots. I think it was a pretty clear 3-2 decision and a very good showing for Anderson. I think his stock went up in that fight. But I don't know what he would have done differently in his prime than he did in that fight. He looked pretty much identical to the old Anderson, at least that I've seen. Now, I haven't seen every single one of Anderson's fights. I've seen a good majority of them. But I'll tell you what, man, it's fascinating to behold what he does in there still to this day. And I wonder what Anderson's going to show up in that fight. And we also got Ben Askren versus Jorge Masvidal being set up currently. That's a big fight, man. That's a fight I want to see. I think that if we see a fight like this, where we see Ben Askren, who's an excellent wrestler, versus Jorge Masvidal, who's a very, very good striker, man, I think this is going to be an Askren domination. I really do. I don't see any way that Jorge Masvidal wins this fight. I think Ben walks right across the cage, grabs him, puts him against the cage, throws him on the ground, and just punches him for the rest of the fight. And I could be wrong. I said that Ben Askren was going to beat Robbie Lawler, and I did say that I thought that Robbie Lawler was basically just going to get taken down. And far from that. After Askren was done getting beat up on the mat for a couple minutes. I love Ben Askren. I'm sorry. But when we saw that, and when he finally gets back up, he finally gets a hold of him. That's all he needed to do, Ben Askren did. Is once he got a hold of Robbie, it was going to be tough for him. And finally, when he did get a hold of him, he had him against the cage. He eventually got his hands locked behind his back, threw him on the ground, got the back, and just that was it. That's what Ben does. You can smash him in the face, with big just bombs that Robbie was throwing, and it's never really the end of the fight for Ben Askren because he is a tough son of a bitch. And so I wonder if Jorge has better power than Robbie Lawler, and I don't know if he does, because I especially don't see Jorge just being able to punch Ben 2 or 3 times and that'll be the end of the fight. I think that Ben's going to come out there, he's probably going to take a shot or two, and he's going to get, and that's if that, and I think that he's going to get him in the clinch or get him on the ground or trip him or something like that, and I just think that you're going to see Ben just smash him. It might even be a first-round submission. And it's not because I think Jorge sucks. I think Jorge's a great fighter. I just think that Ben Askren is probably the best welterweight in the world. I just don't see after that Robbie performance. And just to clear that up, actually, because I have my own opinion on that, and that I think that what happened was Ben Askren had Robbie in the bulldog choke. I think that his arm went limp because he was out. And then what happens is you see Herb Dean, just because of the camera angle, you see him walk forward. And when you see Herb's head block the view of Ben's arm, you see Ben's arm move. And you see his shoulder move, not his arm move, because Herb's blocking it. But you see you see that Ben's arm is moving. Ben claims that he let him go, or like he loosened up the grip because he thought he was going to stop the fight. Or something along those lines, or he was readjusting, whatever it was. But then you see Robbie, which is blocked by Herb Dean's head from the camera view. You see that Robbie put a thumbs up. Now, I think what happened was that he was unconscious, came back, and didn't realize it. And that's what happens a lot of times with these guys. They're like, well, I was never out. I was never out. It's like, no, you were pretty clearly out, man. And he was like, well, I was just trying to relax myself. It's like, I've never, ever seen... I've seen people, like, if their hands are on the ground, they just kind of let their hands go and just try to relax and try to, just grit through it and bear through it and blah, blah, blah. I've seen that. I've never seen anybody's hands drop like that. Well, hand drop like that. He was pretty clearly unconscious. And yes, he came back a second later, but it doesn't matter. It was just like that fight. I can't remember it was a boxing fight where like 2 seconds into the final round, the guy was knocked out and he got back up. But then the ref was like, or he got knocked down, he got back up, but the ref called the fight. Because he's like, he is not able to continue. And everybody's like, well, there's only 2 seconds left. Doesn't matter. He was already out. That's it. That's all it takes. So, I think that Ben pretty clearly won that fight. It was a hell of a performance from Robbie. It was a hell of a performance for Askren. I think both of their stocks went up greatly in that fight. And now I want to see Askren versus Jorge Masvidal. I do not want to see another match against Robbie Lawler. Dana. Like, I get why a lot of people want to see it. I totally understand that, but honestly, it's just something that, like, I don't want to see. I want to see more. I don't want to waste another 3 months of both of these guys' remaining careers just to see a rematch that honestly I could care less about. It's not like it was for a title. Both guys came out looking better than whenever they went in. I just don't see the need for it. You know what I mean? So, Max versus Poirier. That's another good one. Like, here's the thing. I highly doubt Poirier wins, but I also highly doubted that Usman would beat Woodley. So I don't know, man, because Woodley was just it's not that even that he was a dominant champion. Like, a lot of people get that mixed up and they say, oh, he's the second most dominant welterweight champion of all time. It's like, let's look at his title wins and his title defenses. Yeah, he beat Robbie. Hell of a fight. Hell of a fucking finish. It was in the first round. Good job. Awesome fight. First defense was a draw against Wonderboy. Then he beat Wonderboy in the rematch by the narrowest of margins. There were a lot of people that thought that fight was a draw, too. It was a pretty terrible fight, but, I mean, I don't know. I don't remember how I scored it. And then, what is it? He fought Damian Maia in another one of the worst title defenses of all time. And then he beat up Darren Till. He did a great job against Darren Till. And then he lost to, And then he lost to Usman. So, I don't know, man. But I think you got this. I think you got Usman. Like, you're onto something really big with him, I think. And the only problem is that Ben Askren is just making him look like a fool at every turn, and it's so bad because I like Kamaru, I really do, and I like his fighting style. It's very gritty. It's very raw. He just pushes forward. He gets you in the clinch. He knees you in the stomach until you bend over because your body's giving out on you. He'll take your back, punch you in the head repeatedly until either the end of the fight or until you quit. I love that gritty, just raw style of wrestling. The very Randy Couture-esque, and I'm a huge Randy Couture fan. So it's just one of those things, man. And I'm a big fan of just any kind of like gritty, raw, 5-round war kind of a style of fighting. But I'm also a huge fan of Dominic Cruz. I love pretty much any style in MMA. For guys that are punch heavy, kick heavy, elbow heavy. Fuck, I don't know, man. If you do a lot of spinning techniques, if you do a lot of jumping techniques, if you're just a straight sprawl and brawl fighter, if you go with the clinch a lot, if you throw your opponent on the ground a lot, if you try to punch their hole through the cage, I mean, like, man, I'm a big fan of pretty much all styles. The only style I really didn't like was, ironically enough, it was basically just Woodley's fight against Damian Maia. That might have been the second or third worst fight I've ever seen. Well, no, I don't think we can say that, but it's probably in the top 10 as far as like worst title fights of all time. That's probably in top 5 or top 3, to be honest. But it was that it was a lot of sprawling because how else are you going to fight Damian Maia? If he gets you on the ground, you've already lost, most likely. You can be like Gunnar Nelson and be really good on the ground, but just good enough to avoid being submitted, but not good enough to avoid getting the shit beat out of him the whole fight. No disrespect, of course. I love Gunnar Nelson. But it's just a case, man, where like Woodley threw nothing in that fight. He did nothing in that fight. He just barely edged out every round because it's not like he barely won the fight or anything, but like they were pretty clear rounds that Woodley won, but it's not like he did anything really exceptional, and like it is what it is, but it was a pretty bad performance in my opinion. I don't think it made either fighter look good. So, I don't know, I look at things like that and I wonder like what the title fights are going to contain. Like when are we going to get back to a more scheduled style of the UFC and less of a super fight era? Now, WME-IMG purchased the UFC for $4.025 billion, so naturally they got to make some goddamn money. But I think within the next couple years, we're actually going to see the UFC kind of go back to what it was before, which was that the champion fights the number one contender, blah, blah, blah. But I think for now, they just got to make some money fights. And you know what? That's okay. I love seeing Anthony Pettis versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Max Holloway fighting Dustin Poirier for the belt, or for the interim belt, rather. Like, there's just some really great fights going on right now, and like, are they on the gimmick side of things? Yes. I mean, like Michael Bisping versus George St. Pierre was a great example of that, where just you had Robert Whittaker and Yoel Romero and Chris Weidman and just like all these guys that were more deserving than George St. Pierre, rather. But again, is George St. Pierre, you're going to tell me that George St. Pierre is not the number one contender at any given point? He's the greatest fighter of all time, pretty much, and dude, he is always the number one contender. If there's anything you do to get George back, you get George back. And I still think that Habib Nurmagomedov fight with George St. Pierre will happen. I happen to think that it will happen. Because I'm not sure that I buy the whole George retirement. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much the most unsure and the most not final, or the most not finalized retirement I've ever seen in my life. Like I was kind of shocked by it, to be honest, just because he was like, oh yeah, it's been a great run, and yeah, I guess it's over now, sorta, kinda, and maybe something will happen, but no, I think I'm done, and yeah, maybe I'll come back. And you're just like, well, which is it, man? Like, are you gonna come back and fight one more time, or is this it? And he's saying it's it, but honestly, man, I don't buy it. I think that we're gonna see George at least one more time, and I think it's gonna be against Khabib. Smoke break. This is the best part of the show right here, man. So, smoke break. All right, so I guess from there, like, what are the other things I'm going to talk about from this podcast? The Gustafsson versus Lionheart fight, and man, that's a big fight. And honestly, I'm going with the underdog. I say that Lionheart Smith comes out with a victory. I don't think that Gustafsson's going to be able to finish him. I think that if John Jones can't finish Lionheart, then I'm pretty sure that Alexander Gustafsson isn't going to. And I understand that Jones, like, if he really wanted to unload, could have maybe got the fight stopped, but I don't know. So, the fact is that if he was going to knock him out, he would have knocked him out. You know what I mean? Just something happened that made knocking him out not the best idea. So, there. But I look at that fight, and I was like, okay, well, you got Lionheart, who's just going to keep coming forward. Whether you like it or not, no matter how many times you knock him down, he's going to keep getting back up. So it's a question of really, can Gustafsson put him away? And I don't think he's gonna. And I think that you got Lionheart, who's also got pretty good hands and lands some really rough overhands and some really rough kicks. And I think that there's a good chance he actually finishes Gustafsson. I'm not going to lie. But we're getting about to that 40-minute mark, you guys, so I'm going to cut this a little bit short, though. I did this a little bit more of a test run. So if you guys enjoyed this show and you'd like to see more, be sure to give me a subscribe on YouTube. You guys can also follow me on iTunes, Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, Podbean, and I'm sure you can find me probably somewhere else if you look hard enough now. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.